The sun was setting over New Mesa, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Danny Cole stood inside his small repair shop, wiping his hands on an old rag that had seen better days. His shop was nothing special, just a converted warehouse on the edge of town where farmers and settlers brought their broken machines. The smell of oil and metal filled the air, and the sound of humming machines was constant. Danny was a simple man. He had lived on this dusty colony planet for 15 years, ever since he left Earth looking for a quieter life. He was good with his hands, good with machines, and that was enough. He fixed tractors, household robots, water pumps, and anything else that people brought to him. He didn't ask for much, just enough credits to keep his shop running and food on his table. The bell above the door chimed, and Danny looked up from the engine part he was cleaning. A small figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading light. For a moment, Danny thought it was a human child, maybe one of the settler kids who sometimes wandered into his shop out of curiosity. But then the figure stepped forward, and Danny felt his heart skip a beat. The child was small, maybe 4 feet tall, and wore a traveling cloak made of material that seemed to shimmer and change color as it moved. The fabric was too fine, too elegant for this dusty backwater planet. When the hood fell back, Danny saw a face that was definitely not human. Her skin was like polished silver, smooth and gleaming even in the dim light of the shop. Beneath the surface, faint geometric patterns pulsed with a soft blue glow, like circuits made of light. Her eyes were large, much larger than human eyes, and colored a deep violet that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. She had no hair, but delicate ridges ran along her scalp, creating patterns that might have been beautiful if Danny had not been so shocked. In her arms, she clutched something small and still. It looked like an android, but unlike any android Danny had ever seen. It was about the size of a house cat, with elegant curves and joints made of something that looked like crystal. The design was sleek, almost organic, and Danny could tell immediately that it was worth more than his entire shop, maybe more than his entire town. The little alien girl looked up at him with those violet eyes, and Danny saw that they were glistening with tears. Her lower lip trembled, and despite all the strangeness of the moment, Danny felt his heart soften. He had seen that look before, on the face of his own daughter Maya years ago, when her favorite toy had broken. "Please," the girl said. Her voice was soft and musical, and her English was accented but clear. "Please, can you fix her? She won't wake up." Danny set down his rag and walked slowly toward the child. He was careful not to make any sudden movements, not wanting to frighten her. He knelt down so that he was at her eye level, his knees cracking as he did so. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Lyra," she whispered. "My name is Lyra, and this is Nyx. She's my friend, my only friend." Danny looked at the android in her arms. Up close, he could see that the crystalline joints were cracked, and the small lights that should have been glowing were dark. The power core in its chest flickered weakly, like a candle about to go out. "Where are your parents, Lyra?" Danny asked. "Where's your mom or dad?" Lyra's eyes dropped to the floor. "My mother is. She is busy, very important. I came here by myself. I asked, and finally she let me try to find help." Danny frowned. What kind of parent let a child wander alone on a strange planet? But he pushed the thought aside. That wasn't his business. His business was fixing things. "How long has Nyx been like this?" he asked. 3 days, Lyra said, and her voice cracked. "I took her to the repair stations on 3 different places. Big places with smart people and fancy tools. They all said the same thing. They said she was broken too badly. They said no one could fix her." Danny reached out and gently took the android from Lyra's arms. It was lighter than he expected, and warm to the touch despite appearing lifeless. He turned it over carefully, examining the damage. The crystalline pathways were cracked in multiple places, and the power core was damaged in ways he didn't fully understand. "I'm going to be honest with you, Lyra," Danny said slowly. "I've never seen technology like this before, I don't even know what half of these parts are. I'm just a simple mechanic on a small planet. I fix tractors and water pumps." Lyra's face crumpled, and tears began to roll down her silver cheeks. The geometric patterns beneath her skin flickered faster, pulsing with her distress. Danny felt something twist in his chest. He thought again of Maya, of all the times she had come to him with broken toys and scraped knees, trusting him to make everything better. He thought of how it felt to see a child cry and know you had the power to help. "Hey now," he said softly. "I didn't say I wouldn't try, I just said it would be hard." He stood up and looked around his cluttered shop. "Tell you what, you see that stool over there? Why don't you pull it up to my workbench and you can watch while I work? I'll do everything I can to help your friend." Lyra looked up at him, hope flickering in those violet eyes. "You will try, even though you don't know how." "I've fixed a lot of things I didn't know how to fix," Danny said with a small smile. "Sometimes you just have to figure it out as you go. Now, do you like hot cocoa? I've got a machine in the back that makes pretty good cocoa." Lyra tilted her head, confused. "What is hot cocoa?" "It's a warm drink," Danny explained. "Sweet, made from something called chocolate. It's what humans drink when they need comfort. Trust me, you'll like it." Outside the shop, hidden in the growing darkness, something shimmered in the air. A cloaking field, the most advanced in the galaxy, concealed a ship that would have made human engineers weep with envy. It was a royal vessel, designed for speed and stealth, and it carried cargo more precious than any treasure. Inside the ship, a woman sat upon a command throne that seemed grown from living crystal. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with the same silver skin and geometric patterns as the child. But where Lyra's patterns were soft and blue, this woman's patterns blazed with gold, marking her as royalty. Empress of the Dominion watched through a tiny drone no bigger than a fly, which hovered near the ceiling of the mechanic's shop. Her ancient eyes, violet like her daughter's but filled with centuries of wisdom and power, observed every movement the human made. "Your Majesty," said Counselor, her chief advisor, who stood beside the throne, "this is inadvisable. We should retrieve the princess and leave this primitive world. Their technology is centuries behind ours. This mechanic cannot possibly repair a companion unit." "Perhaps," said, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that made the air itself vibrate. "But my daughter wished to try, and I wish to observe." "Observe what, Your Majesty?" Did not answer immediately. She watched the human pour a cup of hot cocoa for her daughter, watched him set the broken android gently on his workbench, watched him roll up his sleeves and begin to work. "I wish to observe," she finally said, "what humans do when they think no one is watching." Danny set the small android on his workbench and pulled his diagnostic scanner from its hook on the wall. The scanner was old, bought second-hand when he first opened the shop, but it had never failed him. He pressed the button and ran it over the android's body, watching the screen fill with data. Most of the data made no sense at all. Half the components inside this little machine weren't even in his database. The scanner kept displaying error messages, telling him that it couldn't identify the materials or the design. The crystalline neural pathways, the ones that carried information through the android's body like nerves in a living creature, were cracked in at least 3 places. The power core flickered like a dying star, barely holding on. Danny sat back on his stool and rubbed the back of his neck. Lyra sat on the other stool, her small hands wrapped around the cup of hot cocoa. She had taken her first sip with wide eyes, surprised by the sweetness, and now she drank it slowly while watching Danny with a mix of hope and fear. "Okay," Danny said, more to himself than to her. "Okay, let's think about this." He had fixed a lot of things in his life. Broken engines, burned-out circuits, machines that other mechanics had given up on. The secret, he had learned, was that most things worked on the same basic principles. Power had to flow, connections had to be made, moving parts had to move freely. He didn't know what this android was made of, but it still had to follow the basic rules of the universe. "Lyra," he said, "tell me about Nyx. What does she do? What is she supposed to do when she's working?" Lyra set down her cup. "Nyx is a companion unit. She has been with me since I was very small. She talks to me, plays games with me, tells me stories. She protects me when I am scared." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "She is my best friend." Danny nodded. So the android was designed for companionship and protection. That meant it needed to process language, recognize faces, respond to emotions. Complicated stuff, but not impossible to understand. He picked up a magnifying lens and leaned close to examine the cracked neural pathways. The cracks were small, barely visible to the naked eye, but they were enough to break the connections that let information flow through the android's body. Without those connections, the android couldn't think, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything. "The problem is these cracks," Danny said, pointing so Lyra could see. "Information can't get through when the pathways are broken. It's like, imagine a road with big holes in it. Cars can't drive on a road with holes. We need to fill the holes." Lyra leaned forward, her violet eyes wide. "Can you fill them?" "I don't have the same material they used to make these pathways," Danny admitted. "But maybe I can use something else, something that conducts information the same way." He stood up and walked to the back of his shop, where shelves upon shelves held boxes of spare parts, salvaged components and materials he had collected over the years. He never threw anything away. You never knew when something would be useful. After 20 minutes of searching, he found what he was looking for. It was a tube of conductive paste, designed for industrial robots. The paste was meant to repair damaged circuits, and while it wasn't as elegant as the crystalline pathways in the android, it might work well enough. Danny returned to the workbench and carefully applied the paste to the first crack. The work was delicate, requiring a steady hand and a lot of patience. He used the magnifying lens to see what he was doing, and he held his breath as he spread the paste into the tiny gap. "What are you doing?" Lyra asked. "I'm making a bridge," Danny explained. "The information needs to cross from one side to the other. I'm building a bridge for it to cross." For the next hour, he worked on the neural pathways, filling each crack with conductive paste. Some of the cracks were easy to reach, while others required him to carefully open the android's casing and work inside. He was gentle, treating the little machine like it was made of glass. While he worked, he talked to Lyra. He asked her about her favorite colors, and she said she liked the color of stars. He asked her about her favorite games, and she described something that sounded like hide and seek but played across multiple rooms of a spaceship. He asked her if she liked stories about pirates or knights, and she said she liked stories about explorers who discovered new worlds. He didn't ask where she came from. He didn't ask why she was alone or why her mother had sent a child to find help instead of coming herself. Some questions weren't for mechanics to ask. When the neural pathways were repaired, Danny turned his attention to the power core. This was the real problem. The core was damaged in ways he didn't fully understand, and it wasn't producing enough power to run the android. He sat back and thought. On his shelf, he had 3 power stabilizers that he had salvaged from different machines over the years. None of them were designed for anything like this android, but maybe, if he combined them in the right way, he could create something that would work. For the next 2 hours, Danny worked on building a new power regulation system. He took apart the 3 stabilizers and studied their components. He figured out how they worked, then figured out how to combine the best parts of each one into something new. It was messy work, involving a lot of soldering and rewiring, but slowly, a new device took shape. When he was done, he carefully connected the new stabilizer to the android's power core. The connection wasn't perfect, and he had to use some tape and wire to hold everything in place, but it was functional. "Okay," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Let's see if this works." He pressed the activation button on the android's chest. Nothing happened. Lyra made a small sound of despair, and Danny felt his heart sink. But then he noticed something. The power core was flickering, but not in the random way it had before. It was flickering in a pattern, like it was trying to start up but couldn't quite get there. "Hold on," Danny said. "I think it needs more power to get started, like jumping a car battery." He grabbed a portable power pack from his workbench and connected it to the android. He sent a surge of power into the system, hoping it would be enough to the core. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the power core began to glow brighter. The flicker became steady. The crystalline pathways lit up, soft light flowing through them like blood through veins. Aboard the hidden ship outside, Empress leaned forward in her throne. Her fingers gripped the armrests, her ancient eyes wide with disbelief. "That is not possible," Counselor said, his voice shaking. "That repair is not possible. Our own technicians could not have done what this human is doing." "And yet," said softly, "he is doing it." She watched the human work, this simple mechanic with his primitive tools and his second-hand parts. She watched him refuse to give up, refuse to accept that something was impossible. She watched him talk gently to her daughter, keeping the child calm and hopeful even as he struggled with technology beyond his understanding. The intelligence reports on humanity had described them as violent, primitive, and divided. They fought wars among themselves. They polluted their own planet. They had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. But no report had mentioned this. No report had described the stubborn determination, the creative problem-solving, the simple kindness of a man who would spend hours helping a stranger's child, asking nothing in return. Had ruled the Dominion for 200 years. She had seen 1,000 species, 1,000 civilizations. She had learned to judge them by their technology, their military power, their political sophistication. Perhaps, she thought as she watched Danny Cole work, she had been using the wrong measurements all along. The android's eyes opened. They were amber, warm and golden, and they glowed with soft inner light. For a moment they stared at nothing, processing, calculating, coming back to life after 3 days of darkness. Then they moved, scanning the room, taking in the cluttered workshop, the strange tools, the unfamiliar surroundings. Finally, the amber eyes found Lyra. "Primary user detected," the android said. Its voice was like wind chimes, soft and musical. "Lyra, I am functioning. This unit should not be functioning. Running diagnostic. Critical damage detected in neural pathways. Power core operating at reduced capacity. Multiple non-standard repairs identified. This unit should not be functioning." Lyra burst into tears. She jumped off her stool and grabbed the android, pulling it into a tight hug. Nix, you're okay. I thought you were gone forever." The android's small arms moved, slowly at first, then with more confidence. They wrapped around Lyra, returning the hug. "This unit is not gone, Lyra. This unit is here. This unit will always be here for you." Danny sat back on his stool, exhaustion washing over him. His back ached, his eyes were sore from staring through the magnifying lens, and his fingers were cramped from the delicate work. But he was grinning, a wide smile spreading across his weathered face. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "It actually worked." Lyra pulled back from the hug, still holding Nix in her arms. She turned to look at Danny, and her violet eyes were shining with more than just tears. The geometric patterns beneath her silver skin pulsed bright blue, brighter than he had seen them all evening. "You fixed her," Lyra said, her voice full of wonder. "They all said it was impossible. All those smart people with their fancy tools. They all said no one could fix her, but you did it." Danny shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed by the admiration in her eyes. "I just did what I always do. Found the problem, figured out a solution, made it work. Nothing special about that." Nix turned her amber eyes toward Danny. The android tilted her head, studying him with evident curiosity. "This unit disagrees. This unit's damage was classified as irreparable by 17 certified technicians across 4-star systems. You are not certified. Your tools are primitive. Your methods are unorthodox. Your repairs do not follow any known engineering standards. Hey, they work, don't they? Danny said with a laugh. They do, Nix admitted. This unit cannot explain how, but they do. This unit will need to update its definition of human capabilities. The android paused, then added, "This unit thanks you, Danny Cole. You have restored this unit to functionality. More importantly, you have returned this unit to Lyra. This unit's primary function is to protect and comfort Lyra. Without functionality, this unit could not fulfill that function. You have given this unit purpose again." Danny felt his throat tighten. He wasn't used to such earnest gratitude, especially not from machines. "You're welcome, Nix. Just take good care of your girl there, okay?" "Always," Nix said, and her voice held something that sounded almost like emotion. Lyra set Nix down on the workbench, then turned to face Danny fully. She stood up straight, her small body suddenly formal. "Danny Cole, I am in your debt. You have done me a great service. Please tell me what I owe you." Danny blinked, surprised by the sudden formality. The little girl who had come into his shop trembling and tearful was now speaking like a diplomat negotiating a treaty. He thought about the question seriously. He had worked for nearly 6 hours on this repair. He had used parts from his own supplies, expensive parts that would be hard to replace. He had skipped dinner, worked past his usual closing time, and pushed his skills to their absolute limit. A fair price would be significant, enough to cover his costs, his time, his expertise, enough to make a real difference in his struggling business. But then he looked at Lyra, at her big violet eyes, still wet from crying, at the way she clutched Nix's small hand, at the joy that radiated from her silver skin. He thought about Maya, his daughter, who was grown now and living on a space station somewhere in the outer systems. He thought about all the times she had brought him broken things, trusting him to fix them. He thought about how it felt to see her smile when something was whole again. "Tell you what," Danny said slowly. "You smile for me and we'll call it even." Lyra stared at him. "I do not understand. My smile is payment." "Your smile is plenty," Danny said. "I didn't do this for money, Lyra. I did it because you were a kid who needed help. That's reason enough." Lyra's face transformed. The formality melted away, replaced by a smile so radiant it seemed to light up the whole shop. The blue patterns beneath her skin blazed bright, pulsing with happiness. She looked for that moment exactly like what she was, a little girl who had just gotten her best friend back. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you, Danny Cole. I will never forget what you did for me." She threw herself forward and hugged him, her small arms wrapping around his waist. Danny was startled for a moment, then he smiled and hugged her back, patting her head gently. "You're welcome, sweetheart. Now it's getting late. Don't you need to get back to wherever you're staying?" Lyra pulled back, suddenly looking uncertain. Yes, I should return. My mother will be waiting." Aboard the hidden ship, Empress stood up from her throne. Her movements were slow, almost dazed, like someone waking from a dream. Her golden patterns pulsed unevenly, betraying an emotional turmoil that she rarely showed. "Your Majesty," Counselor asked, concern in his voice, "are you well?" "I have ruled the Dominion for 200 years," said quietly. "I have negotiated with warlords and emperors. I have made treaties with species that had nothing to offer us. I have always asked what we could gain, what advantage we could secure, what benefit we could extract." She turned to look at, and her ancient eyes were bright with something that might have been wonder. This human spent 6 hours repairing something he did not understand, using tools that were not adequate for a child he had never met. And when my daughter offered to pay him, he asked only for a smile. Shifted uncomfortably. "Humans are known for their sentiment, Your Majesty, their attachment to meaningless gestures." "Is it meaningless?" asked. Or is it something we have forgotten, something we lost along the way to building our great dominion? She walked toward the ship's exit, her golden robe sweeping behind her. Prepare my formal attire, counselor. Disable the cloaking field. I am going to meet this mechanic myself. Your Majesty, that is inadvisable. The security risks alone. Stopped and looked back at him. Her eyes were ancient, powerful, and absolutely certain. Counselor, I have spent 2 centuries judging species by their technology, their power, their usefulness to the Dominion. Tonight, a human with no power and no technology showed my daughter more kindness than most of our own nobles ever have. The least I can do is say thank you in person. She continued toward the exit, leaving standing by the throne with his mouth open. Besides, she added, I believe I would like to try this hot cocoa that my daughter seems so fond of. Danny was pouring a second cup of hot cocoa for Lyra when the door of his shop opened again. The woman who entered had to duck her head to fit through the doorway. She was nearly 7 feet tall, and she moved with a grace that seemed impossible for someone so large. Her silver skin gleamed in the light of Danny's workshop, and the geometric patterns that covered her body blazed with gold, not blue, creating intricate designs that seemed to shift and flow like living things. She wore armor that looked like it had been grown rather than forged, flowing lines and organic curves that covered her body without restricting her movement. A circlet of pure light rested on her brow, hovering just above her skin without touching it. And her eyes, violet like Lyra's but deeper and older, held centuries of wisdom and power. The cup slipped from Danny's fingers. It shattered on the floor, spraying hot cocoa across his boots. He barely noticed. Lyra gasped and scrambled off her stool. Mother! The little girl ran to the tall woman who knelt down to embrace her. It was a strange sight, this towering, regal figure holding her child with such tenderness. When she stood again, one hand resting on Lyra's shoulder, she turned her full attention to Danny. Danny's throat went dry. Every instinct told him that he was in the presence of something vast and powerful, something that could crush him without effort. He had faced down angry farmers, cheated merchants, and even a few desperate criminals over the years, but he had never felt anything like this. Danny Cole, the woman said. Her voice resonated with harmonic undertones, as if multiple voices were speaking at once in perfect harmony. The sound made his bones hum and his teeth vibrate. I am Empress of the Dominion, ruler of the 17 spirals, voice of the eternal accord, first among the council of stars. Danny's legs felt weak. He grabbed the edge of his workbench to steady himself. He managed, I just fixed a robot. His expression, which had been stern and imperial, softened slightly. Something that might have been amusement flickered in her ancient eyes. You did far more than that, Danny Cole. She stepped forward, moving through his cluttered workshop as if it were a grand throne room. Her robe swept aside old tools and scattered spare parts, but she paid them no attention. Her eyes remained fixed on him. I have watched you, she continued. From the moment my daughter entered this shop, I have observed your every action through means you cannot perceive. I came to this world expecting to find what we have found in most species: selfishness, suspicion, hostility toward the unfamiliar, fear of that which is different. Danny didn't know what to say. He stood there frozen as the Empress circled him slowly. Instead, said, I found a man who welcomed a frightened alien child without hesitation, who offered her comfort and warmth, who spent 6 hours repairing technology he did not understand, using methods that should not have worked, simply because a child was sad. She stopped in front of him, looking down at him with those violet eyes that seemed to see through everything. And when my daughter offered to pay you for this service, you asked only for her smile, not credits, not favors, not technology or secrets or anything of material value. A smile. Danny swallowed hard. She was scared. She was alone. Her friend was broken and she needed help. That's all it was. Yes, said. That is precisely what it was, and that is precisely why it matters. She turned and walked to the window, looking out at the dusty streets of New Mesa. The night had fully fallen now, and the stars were bright overhead. The Dominion has watched humanity for many years, she said. Your species emerged into the galaxy only recently, barely a century ago. We have observed your technology, your societies, your conflicts. My advisors have written many reports about your kind. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. They told me humans were primitive, violent, divided among themselves, unable to agree even on basic matters of survival. They told me your species was not ready for true contact with the galactic community, that we should wait, perhaps another century, perhaps longer, before revealing ourselves. Danny said nothing. He sensed that she was not finished. Tonight, Danny Cole, you have shown me something that no report ever captured, no intelligence analysis ever explained. She turned back to face him. You have shown me the human heart. Danny felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. I'm just a mechanic, ma'am, your majesty, whatever I'm supposed to call you. I just fix things, that's all I do. That is not all you do, said firmly. You showed compassion to a stranger. You offered help without expecting reward. You treated my daughter with kindness and respect, even though she is alien to you, even though her technology is beyond your understanding, even though helping her offered you nothing but trouble and exhaustion. She walked back toward him, and this time she did something that made Danny's heart nearly stop. She knelt. The Empress of the Dominion, ruler of 17 spiral arms of the galaxy, commander of fleets that could destroy worlds, knelt before a backwater mechanic in a dusty repair shop. In my culture, said, we kneel only before those who have earned our deepest respect, those who have shown us something true and valuable. I have not knelt before anyone in over 100 years. Please get up, Danny said, his voice barely a whisper. Please, this isn't, you shouldn't. Rose gracefully, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You are uncomfortable with honor, Danny Cole. That too is telling. She extended her hand toward Lyra, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. The little girl ran to her mother's side and placed her hand gently on her daughter's head. For centuries, we have judged species by their technology, their military power, their political sophistication. We have measured their worth by what they could offer the Dominion, what advantages they could bring to our alliances, what threats they might pose to our security. Her eyes met Danny's, and he saw something warm there, something almost like hope. Perhaps we have been using the wrong measurements. Perhaps the true measure of a species is not how powerful they are, but how they treat those who have no power. Not what they take, but what they give. Not their technology, but their hearts. Danny didn't know what to say. He was just a mechanic. He fixed broken things. That was all he knew how to do. But looking at the Empress and her daughter, at the gratitude and respect in their ancient eyes, he wondered if maybe that was enough. I came here tonight to thank you, said, and I have done so, but I have also come to ask you something. Ask me something, Danny repeated. What could you possibly want to ask me? Smiled, and the expression transformed her stern features into something warm and almost beautiful. How do you make this hot cocoa that my daughter cannot stop talking about? 3 months had passed since that night in the repair shop. Danny Cole stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Eternal Dawn, watching Earth grow larger in The planet was beautiful from this distance, a swirl of blue and white and green, hanging in the darkness of space like a precious jewel. He still couldn't quite believe he was here. Beside him, Lyra pressed her face against the transparent wall, her violet eyes wide with excitement. Nyx sat on her shoulder, the small android's amber eyes also fixed on the approaching planet. Is that really where you come from? Lyra asked. It's so pretty. That's Earth, Danny said, his voice thick with emotion. I haven't seen it in 15 years. Didn't think I'd ever see it again. I want to see everything, Lyra said. The oceans and the mountains and the cities. You told me about the Grand Canyon, remember? And the northern lights. I want to see all of it. Danny smiled and ruffled the ridges on top of her head, a gesture of affection she had grown used to over the past months. We'll have time, sweetheart. We'll have plenty of time. The door behind them opened, and Empress entered the observation deck. She had changed from her formal armor into simpler robes, deep purple that complemented her silver skin. The circlet of light still rested on her brow, but her expression was relaxed, almost peaceful. Ambassador Cole, she said, we will arrive in Earth orbit within the hour. Are you prepared? Danny turned to face her, still uncomfortable with the title. I told you I'm just Danny, and no, I'm not prepared at all. I'm a mechanic. I fix things. I don't know the first thing about diplomacy or treaties or galactic politics. I know, said, and there was warmth in her ancient eyes. That is precisely why I chose you. She walked to stand beside him, looking out at Earth. In this reflection, Danny could see both of them, the towering Empress and the weathered mechanic, side by side. Do you know what happened after I returned to the Dominion and told the Council about you? Asked. Danny shook his head. They argued for days. My advisors said I had lost my mind. They said humans were too primitive, too unstable, too dangerous to be trusted with full galactic membership. They showed me statistics about your wars, your pollution, your social divisions. They presented detailed analyses of your military capabilities and concluded that humanity posed an unacceptable risk. She turned to look at him directly. Do you know what I told them? I'm afraid to ask, Danny said. Smiled. I told them about a mechanic who fixed an android he didn't understand, for a child he'd never met, and asked only for a smile in return. I told them about hot cocoa and gentle words and patience that lasted 6 hours without complaint. I told them that the measure of a species is not found in their weapons or their technology, but in how they treat those who cannot repay them. She looked back at Earth, now filling most of the. They voted, 12-5 in favor of full diplomatic contact with humanity, the largest margin in over a century. Danny didn't know what to say. His hands were shaking, so he shoved them in his pockets. When the Earth governments learned that the Dominion wished to establish formal relations, they were overjoyed, continued. Then they learned that I had already chosen an ambassador, and they were less pleased. I bet they were, Danny muttered. I'm nobody. I don't have any qualifications, any training, any experience. There are thousands of people more qualified than me. There are thousands of people with more qualifications, agreed. But qualifications are not what I need. The Dominion has dealt with qualified diplomats for. They speak pretty words, make careful promises, negotiate advantages. They represent their governments, not their people. She placed a hand on his shoulder, and despite her size and power, her touch was gentle. I do not want a representative of Earth's governments, Danny Cole. I want a representative of Earth's people. I want someone who will show the galaxy what humanity truly is, not what your politicians want us to see. I want someone honest, kind, and stubborn enough to fix an unfixable android because a little girl was crying. Danny looked down at his hands. They were rough and calloused, marked with old burns and scars from years of working with machines, not the hands of a diplomat. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted. You will make mistakes, said. You will say the wrong things. You will confuse our customs and offend important people. You will struggle with protocols that make no sense and traditions that seem foolish. She smiled, and for a moment she looked almost human. And through it all, you will be exactly what you are. A good man who helps people because it's the right thing to do. That is more valuable than all the diplomatic training in the galaxy. The ship's communication system chimed. "Your Majesty, Ambassador Cole, we are beginning our approach to Earth. The welcoming committee is assembled and waiting." Danny took a deep breath. On the Earth continued to grow, more detailed now. He could see the outlines of continents, the swirls of weather patterns, the lights of cities on the night side. Somewhere down there, politicians and generals and news cameras were waiting. They would ask him questions he couldn't answer. They would expect him to be something he wasn't. They would wonder why the most powerful empire in the galaxy had chosen a nobody from a backwater colony to represent all of humanity. And Danny would tell them the truth. He would tell them about a little girl with silver skin and violet eyes who walked into his shop with a broken friend. He would tell them about 6 hours of work and a cup of hot cocoa. He would tell them that sometimes the biggest things start with the smallest acts. "Danny," Lyra tugged at his sleeve, "are you scared?" He looked down at her, this strange little alien girl who had become something like a daughter to him over the past months. He thought about everything that had changed since she walked into his shop. He thought about everything that was about to change. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said, "I'm terrified." "That's okay," Lyra said. She took his hand in hers, her silver fingers wrapping around his rough human ones. "Nix and I will help you. We'll figure it out together." Danny squeezed her hand gently. "Yeah, I guess we will." Empress watched them with something like pride in her ancient eyes. She had ruled the Dominion for 2 centuries. She had seen 1,000 species, 1,000 civilizations rise and fall. She had learned to recognize strength in many forms. But this, she thought, was a kind of strength she had nearly forgotten. The strength of simple kindness. The strength of a helping hand offered without conditions. The strength of a heart that cared not for profit or power, but simply for doing what was right. "Come," she said, gesturing toward the door. "It is time to introduce humanity to the stars." Danny took one last look at Earth, the planet he had left behind so many years ago. He had left as a mechanic looking for a quiet life. He was returning as an ambassador, carrying the weight of first contact on his shoulders. But he was also returning as himself. Just Danny Cole, a man who fixed things because they needed fixing and helped people because they needed help. Maybe, he thought as he followed the Empress toward the landing bay, that would be enough. After all, some revolutions begin not with armies or speeches or great acts of power. Some revolutions begin with a cup of hot cocoa and a stranger's kindness. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change the stars.